Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Energy RX. Today, I am joined by the lovely Eliza Cohen, and we are here today to talk about Mysticism 101. This is for the mystic curious. I think there are a lot of people out there who have heard a lot about different therapies, techniques, tools, and it all feels very overwhelming and like a lot to digest. So, this is a really massively broad conversation. There's so many things that we could get into. It would take us all day and longer to talk about all the different aspects of this, but we're going to pick a few and try to break them down into digestible, easy ways to understand so it can enhance your awareness and understanding and have it not be like such a scary or foreign topic because it's a lot simpler than you may think. And I'm going to start this with some research, why I think people are interested. This is from the Pew Research Center. And it says that spirituality among Americans, 7 in 10 U.S. adults describe themselves as spiritual in some way, including 22% who are spiritual but not religious. 83% of all U.S. adults believe people have a soul or a spirit in addition to their physical body. 81% say there is something spiritual beyond the natural world, even if we cannot see it. 74% say there are some things that science cannot possibly explain. 45% say they've had a sudden feeling of connection with something beyond this world. 38% say they have had a strong feeling that someone who has passed away was communicating with them from beyond this world. 30% say they have personally encountered a spirit or unseen spiritual force. Overall, 70% of U.S. adults can be considered spiritual in some way because they think of themselves as spiritual people or say spirituality is very important in their lives. Okay, something kind of interesting is this research was done by the Pew Research Center, which does tons and tons of research, and it has this huge, massive foundation. And a few months ago, Derek Pugh of the Pew Research Center family came on the show. You can go back and listen to talk about his new book he wrote, The All Manifesting. And what's interesting about Derek's story is he started using one of the techniques we'll talk about. He started using, because he's an entrepreneur and CEO, yada, 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 all the things. He had a CEO coach who recommended to him that he do something that is called, it's through the Monroe Institute, and I've got to think of the name of it. But essentially, it's using some binaural beats and learning kind of how to astral travel in a way. And he had such a profound, mystical, incredible experience through doing this work that he had all of his knowledge, all of his information come in, and he literally wrote a book about it. So he's someone who was fairly mainstream, tapped into using some of these techniques, had a revolution within himself. And now this is his, like, one of his leading edges in his life, apart from his businesses, is he's so fascinated and curious about expanding in this that he literally wrote a book, and he spends a lot of his time now in these fields. So it can happen to anybody. It can happen to Derek Pugh. So Eliza, you had some good ideas about kicking off this topic of some like tiptoeing into the topic of mysticism.
Yeah, there are so many places that we could start with this because it really is such a broad topic.
Yeah.
I think it might be fun for us to talk about our entry to mysticism
Okay.
and go back in time as to what were those initial things that sparked our interest. And I'm happy to start and share a couple of my experiences. I think most people have heard my stories as a child where I would see my grandfather who had passed away in
Right.
our home. So I'm not going to rehash those. But if you're curious, they're everywhere, so you can find them.
Hmm.
But aside from that, I would say when I was very, very little, my mom would ask me this question, and she would ask because I would say things that were just, I think, pretty interesting and absurd to her. And she was very fascinated by me because I was her child. And
Yeah.
I was always saying things that were like strange. And she used to ask me, she would say, "Where do you come from?" And I would look at her, and I was like 2 or 3 years old. And I would say, "Mom, I really can't say." But the interesting thing about that answer to me is that there was this awareness that I always came from somewhere else, that there was this awareness of the soul, not necessarily the body and the reincarnation process
Yeah.
and the birth process, but there was always this awareness of there was this other place beyond me that I couldn't really put words to, but I was aware of. So I feel like that is really my foundation. It was just this knowing, even as a child. But I have very strong memories in my adolescence, actually, with my father. And if you know my dad is very cerebral. He is, all logic and books and philosophy, and he's the best. But not someone that you would potentially categorize as interested in tarot or mysticism or spirituality, even though if you know him really well, you would know that that is an interest of his.
Right.
But it's not really what people would initially think, and probably not what I would associate with him at such a young age. And I don't remember why or how, but my dad at some point, I was probably like 10 or 11, he says to me, "Would you like to have, I'll give you a tarot reading?" And I didn't know what tarot was, let alone that my father had tarot cards or knew how to give a tarot reading, because this, I'm telling you, is so out of character, or at least it felt very out of character to me. But I was into it, I was down. He gives me this reading, and I was like 10 or 11, so I'm secretive, I'm private, I'm definitely not telling my parents
Yeah.
which friends I'm fighting with and which boys I have a crush on, and which homework assignment was late. So he's going into this blind, and he's pulling all these cards for me, and he starts giving me this reading, and my jaw is on the floor. Like, he is nailing every single thing that's happening in my life. And I'm blown away. And I'm going, how on earth is my dad psychic? Is he reading my diary? Like, how does he know this? And so I'm asking him, I'm both excited and a little bit concerned. And he's telling me that the cards, the order and the meaning of the cards are basically showing him themes. And it resonated so deeply in me that I think at that point, I was definitely pivoting. I was like, okay, this is definitely an interest of mine. There are things that I don't understand, and there are ways to understand myself and ways to understand my life experience through these different tools. And that desire to understand myself, and I think ultimately to heal myself, because I had a lot of emotional stuff growing up. And I wanted to free myself of a lot of the emotional turmoil I was going through, just because I think I came into this lifetime with a lot of emotions I needed to process. I had a amazing childhood, amazing family, but it was just more like my soul needed to go through this stuff.
Yeah.
And that really pivoted my interests into this journey of self discovery, which is what I really believe mysticism is. It's a journey of self discovery. And that sparked my interest in studying Kabbalah, which I would love to share about later, and some other. I mean, honestly, I probably got my hands in everything from that time on to where I'm at now. I would hyper fixate on different tools, belief systems. I did not discriminate between any religion or school of thought. And one thing that I realized was basically that every single, in my opinion, every single culture, every single time in history had this focus on understanding the self in an expanded way through different but kind of similar forms of mysticism. And I would love to hear about your journey into mysticism. Then we can kind of talk about some of those different tools, if that sounds good to you.
Yes. So again, my journey into mysticism happened very young also, and we've talked about that also, where this very quickly, I remember as a small child getting up and out of my body when I would go to bed and like running around the house playing. This was not something, we weren't a religious family or spiritual or any of those things. And I did these things, but I didn't know that not everyone could do those things. It wasn't until a lot later that I had that awareness. So that was in talking to my great grandfather and maybe seeing some auras around people. But I wanted be really clear. I think when you're young, if you have those abilities or you remember that you had those abilities, it doesn't mean that you're special or different from somebody else. It's similar to maybe you could color or draw really well easily, but everyone can learn to draw or color. So it's not that there are some special people and some are not. That's not it at all. But I do think some people have a remembrance of some of those abilities when they just are born. And so I think I was young. I had some of those experiences. So that was part of it always was kind of in my field and in my field of awareness. And I remember in third grade, there was a book, Shirley MacLaine wrote this book called Out on a Limb. And how I even came across this book in third grade, I was really young and I read this book and she was describing having out of body experiences. And that right there, oh, someone else is describing this. And she talked about going out on a silver thread, leaving her body. I was like, oh, I don't know the silver thread. I didn't know that piece of it. But it was so exciting to me to have someone else explain it in some way because I didn't have a mentor or a teacher or really anyone else. So kind of anywhere I could get my hands on anything mystical, I would. So I was always had an interest, always was kind of searching and seeking. And then I wasn't able to really fully dive into it until I graduated from college. And that's really when I joined a group in Santa Barbara. And that really, like, that expansion really happened right after college. I think I'd had a few in college, really profound experiences that again sort of shook me. Like, I was on the beach one morning in Santa Barbara and I looked up, it was dawn, and I could see this violet grid with all of these symbols in the sky. The person I was with didn't see it. I was like, am I crazy? What is going on? Like, I'm seeing these things, I'm seeing these symbols, like, it's clear, it's right there. And I'd had a few other experiences like that, but this is pre-internet. There were barely any books on the topic. This was like there wasn't a lot of places to get information, so it was really firsthand experiences. So the minute I found a group, I dove right in because I was like, oh, finally my people. And then that was incredibly expansive because these were all pretty, the people who I was with there were pretty evolved, like incredible awareness, incredible abilities, incredible energy healers. So, and I was the young one there. They were like the elder, and so I learned so much from them. So that was my introduction, starting when I was young, kind of grappling with it, loving it, but solo. I didn't have and no one read my tarot cards. I would have been all over that for sure had someone read my tarot cards.
How would you, just in your personal definition, describe mysticism? Like if someone asked you, okay, what is mysticism? What
Yeah.
would your
So
definition be?
so like those mystical experiences I describe as mysticism for me is this personal experience with something transcendent, where it's an experience where you've felt something, you've had an awareness of something, you've been in communion with something that's not necessarily of this physical realm, that it is something that you've tapped into an unseen force, you've tapped into something that may feel divine, you've had an experience. Perhaps you've seen, like, to see a ghost would be a mystical experience. It's something beyond this realm. You saw it. The people who come in and tell me about their ghost experiences, they know. Like, people may think I'm crazy, but I know what I saw, and they know it. That's something beyond this physical realm. Is what I would say is mysticism, and then it's the search for it, because I do feel like once you have the experience, once you have that connection, once you have that sense of, oh, it's not just me, there's something more going on here than I'm aware of, that begins a curiosity, and that begins, really, I would say, almost a thirst for having more and more of those connections happen, I think.
I love that you use the word beyond because that was the word I was going to use.
Okay.
So we're definitely chilling in the same energy field.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say that for me, and I agree with you completely, it's really mysticism for me is the beyond. And in partnership with that, it is a seeking. It's, for
Hmm.
me, it's seeking to understand where I fit in with the universe, as well as like, where do we all fit in? What is this universe that we are a part of, that we are intrinsically connected to, and also maybe not connected to, and expand it, and we can expand from that. And I just think it's so powerful that if you go back in history, since the beginning of civilizations that we've studied and that there's, records from, there's always been these same questions. Why are we here? What are we doing here? What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? How can we understand this system that is life? And I certainly am like, why are we here? What are we doing here? I need to know all of the answers. And I think for me, it makes life easier. And I found that it has made life, and more specifically, challenges in life more digestible. It's been easier for me to understand them, and also taking a step further to be grateful for them. Because, and that has really, I credit my study of Kabbalah a lot to this, because Kabbalah really seeks to explain why things happen and how they're all happening to reveal more light. And for people that don't know what Kabbalah is, it is a form of Jewish mysticism. Although now I studied at the Kabbalah Center for many years. You don't have to be Jewish to go there. But historically, it was reserved actually for men over the age of 40 who had kind of shown themselves as to be ready of this like deep spiritual knowledge, because it really goes into the fabric of the universe and why we're all here.
I have to tell my Kabbalah story. So, my Kabbalah story. When I was, let's see, I was probably, 25, 26. And I was like, oh, I want to study Kabbalah. At that time, it was kind of had become more popular. I think Madonna was studying, right? People were wearing their red threads. It was kind of hot. I'm like, oh, a form of mysticism that I don't know about. I want to learn it. And so I was at a friend's beach house in Malibu, and her dad, they were Jewish, and her dad would go every summer to Israel, and he would study for 3 months. And so he would bring these rabbis back to LA. And so I was like, oh, here's my chance. I can, you know, talk about the Kabbalah. And so I was talking to this rabbi. I said, oh, I'm really interested in the Kabbalah. And he said, the Kabbalah is not for you. and, so, and then he said, listen, he said, the Kabbalah is not for me. You have to be able like to study a lifetime of the Torah before you can study the Kabbalah. And he wasn't just saying, okay, you're not Jewish, you can't study the Kabbalah. He was saying, look, you have to understand the Torah in completion, which takes a lifetime before you can even begin to journey into the Kabbalah. It's so sacred.
Well, I think I understand this because I think I've told you my Kabbalah story when I was younger and where I was forbidden from studying. Have I ever told you that story?
No.
Well, I was going to say, I think the rules have been a little bit lessened in recent
Okay.
years, because now the wisdom of Kabbalah is super readily available. But he's absolutely correct in the historical perspective.
Okay.
And I had a kind of interesting, similar experience when I was a child. I was at my grandmother's house in Florida, and I was definitely like very curious. So I was always in stuff. And I remember there were all these books on the coffee table. My grandma was sitting in one of the chairs, probably watching Judge Judy, and love Judge Judy. And I was like looking through all of the books on the coffee table, and I was really drawn to one book in particular. And I went over to go open it. My grandma was like, "Do not open that book." And I was like, "What?"
Ooh, now I really want to open it.
Yeah, I was like, "What do you mean don't open that book? Like I've been tearing through your house for years, like unattended." And she kind of looked at me funny, and she winked at me and she's like, "Not yet, when you're older." And I later learned that that book was the Zohar, which is
Oh,
the one of the holy books. And yeah, so of course it made me only want to open it more and eventually learn. But I mean, I was probably a child then and it wouldn't have made any sense to
Sure.
me. So I really do believe that you find the wisdom. And I believe in general, like you find the teacher when you're ready, the teacher finds you, you find whatever wisdom is going to help inform your own self discovery will come to you at the perfect timing. And I didn't end up studying Kabbalah until I was in my early 20s. And it was really the perfect time in my life that I could really apply the wisdom and see a lot of growth within myself. And I actually would love to dive into this concept of like finding the right material or resonating with the right belief system or text, or just kind of in a very expansive way,
Mhm. Yeah.
or the teacher finding you when you're ready. Because I really do believe with mysticism, at least in my experience, I was like voracious. I was like, I want to know it all now. I don't want to stop. And I want to dive full throttle into this journey for myself. And I really had to be a little bit like calm down through the journey, because you're developing yourself as much as you're learning. And so you can't learn too much with the self kind of held back. I find that it's a really beautiful, like parallel process. And so sometimes I'll learn a lot and then I need a period of integration or application. And even with teachers, like I've had physical teachers come into my life and I will really be close to them for a number of years and they'll come in as like a mentor. And
Mhm.
then, we'll part ways for whatever reason, always on good terms. And sometimes there's like a period where I don't really have that physical teacher or that mentor. And my teachers are maybe more in the spirit realm, or it's just really a time for me to teach myself. And I've seen clients, and I've had this in my own experience, where we can be kind of in a rush. And my relationship with the beyond and the divine is now in a place where I really trust them. Like they're going to bring me the right study information, they're going to bring me with the right teacher at the right timing. And yeah, what do you think about that?
100%. I mean, literally, I think I've had books fall off shelves, like walking through a bookstore and a book falling off at my feet. Like that was, and it's some incredible book that I was meant to read. So, and my energy teacher, Joe Dunning, I had this sense, and I don't want to get too far into it, but I found her at the exact right time. So the same thing, like the perfect teacher who you're meant to learn, expand with, and learn from appears in divine timing. So, and that's another thing that I think that we can lean into trusting more, is that we're not missing anything. You're exactly where you need to be. And I think a lot of people have this sense of, oh, I'm behind, or I haven't gotten to this place yet, and I don't understand this, or I want to learn that, without realizing that wherever you are right now is exactly where your soul wants you to be. And if you're meant to expand and grow into something else, you'll feel a call, you'll feel a pull, a curiosity, or you'll meet someone on the street, or you'll be in a bookstore and a book will fall at your feet. And that's divine timing of trusting that you are exactly where you need to be and expanding at your perfect pace in your perfect time, and that you don't need to be anything different than you are right now. So I think there's a piece of that also, where I have people come in like, oh, I wish I had an understanding of this, or I knew how to do that, without appreciating where you already are, in fact. And that all of those possibilities and potentials are in your field. But not to feel like, and I know you're like, oh, I have this voracious appetite, I want to take it all in. I understand that too. There's a million things that I would want to do, but it's okay to slow down and enjoy the journey of it, because I do think this is the mysticism is this the journey of self-discovery, of your place in the universe, of your connection to the unseen world, of whatever that means for you. And this mysticism, I like that you brought it back to ancient times. This is nothing new that we're talking about. This goes all the way back to recorded history. I mean, in Egypt, there were the mystery schools of Isis, where there were, I mean, that was like, that's very well known, where the study of the divine feminine, the study of where there were initiations and rituals and understanding like the hidden messages and symbols in the world. In Greece, there were mystery schools. I think currently there have been like, I don't really understand this. There's kind of like the Freemasons or the Masonic Temple. There's some kind of mystery, something around there. I don't fully understand what that is. I think that's probably the most current mystery school esque. But um, mystery schools have been around because people have been curious about these things for so long, and so you had teachers who you, if you were really felt called to pull to, probably be similar to a nun who wanted to go in and devote her life to God in that way. I think those mystery schools, people were, I want to fully devote myself to this experience with the divine, with mystical. And mysticism is woven into every great religion. So I think in Christianity, it's, you know, prayer, it's meditation, it's contemplation, that union with God, with Jesus, with the divine. In Buddhism, you know, it's the search for enlightenment, like with the Buddha. It is coming to this place of enlightening your being. And Hinduism, I they also have this search. There's, what is it in Hinduism? It's their practice is called the Advaita Vedanta Bhakti Yoga. Again, that's about union, about the divine. We've talked about the Kabbalah, revealing the light.
Mm-hmm.
So mysticism is, in fact, part of all of these, probably at the core of these religions. And then I think what we associate with religion more is not the mystical, not the true union with the divine, but more the rules and regulations around how you're supposed to live, as opposed to the real divinity of it. I have found that we get more caught up with like what you can and can't do, as opposed to just being with whatever they term divinity in that religion. Maybe that some people will be offended by that. I don't mean it in an offensive way. That's just my, as someone who's not religious, how I sort of interpret it.
I think that if you're not offending at least one person, we're not being fully being fully honest. So I think we should aim to offend with love, just a couple
Yeah,
people here and there.
I yes, and so I don't mean that it's only rules and regulations, but to me as an outsider looking at it, I just see a lot of kind of a framework for how you're supposed to live your life, as opposed to seeking that, like really truly seeking your connection to divinity. That's just as an my outside. And so I would say the difference between spirituality and religion, and like I think religion's beautiful, particularly for, you know, incredible connections with people, with being the best person you can be. Like those rules and regulations, like all of those commandments, all of those things are like beautiful rules of life for leading a good life, for being a good person, for loving your neighbor. All of those things are really valuable. I would say if you're spiritual without that side of it, without the religious side, it really is about your pathway, your unique pathway to your connection to divinity. It's a unique path as opposed to a broader path.
Yeah, I think the concept of religion and spirituality is so interesting because I
Mm-hmm.
have just found in my own journey so much evolution with it. Because I think there have been periods of my life where I'd consider myself religious, and then there are periods of my life where I consider myself spiritual. And now I'm kind of in a period of my life where I'm seeking both and
Mm-hmm.
seeking the spirituality to inform the religion. And I think, I mean, we can get way off on a tangent with this one, but it's just,
Yeah.
it's so interesting. And I think the root of it is every form of devotion or every form of practice to connect with your spirit, whether you do it through religion or religious community or religious practices versus you do it from an independent spiritual perspective, it's really this, it's again, it's the seeking. As long as you're seeking with truth and authenticity and what is resonant in the frequency of love with yourself, then I'm from the perspective of like, it doesn't matter what you do. If you want to go on a walk and that's spirituality and religion to you, which it is to me because I love to walk,
Yeah.
beautiful. Or if you want to go to church or if you, whatever you want to do, as long as it is a way of practicing this devotion to the soul and to whatever you believe as your expanded relationship with, whether it's a higher power, it's just a power that's around you, or it's just energy, or maybe it's just love of a neighbor, or love of someone else, and that feels religious to you. Mazel tov.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
there's an interesting quote that I did write down, and it says, this is from Meister Eckhart. He lived from 1260 to 1328, so a long time ago, and he wrote, "Theologians may quarrel, but the mystics of the world speak the same language." And I think that same language is speaking about living from your heart, living with love, living like with this connection. But I do think it's interesting we're talking about religion. We haven't talked much about it. And I didn't read the full article, but I thought this was interesting. And it was an article, I forget who wrote it, but it was how religion has really diminished, like attendance and considering yourself part of a religion has really diminished in the past 50 years. And that we haven't quite seen the what the effects of that will be. And I do think we feel so disconnected as a society right now. And that was a religion has historically been a way that we have found like great community and great connection with people. I don't have the answer to that problem, but I think it's something that's not necessarily to dive into today, but an interesting topic for sure to talk about.
it's such an interesting topic because I can just, again, speak from my own life. I've had periods where I've been very non religious, and religion was very much just like for traditions and customs and history. And that was my understanding of religion and obligation.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, the last 2 years, I've been on a God journey, which I think it's so interesting because God is such a polarizing word. And
Right.
even in my own journey, I'm like, okay, can I even say the word God? Is that offensive? Is that non offensive? Like, am I offended? Am I not offended? But I have just noticed that my mental health has done a 180 in a positive direction once I started on this God journey, because to me, God was intrinsically related to belief systems. And so I was, prior to this, before I had, right, the religion or the spiritual aspect of my life, my belief systems were tied into a lack of trust and fear. And bad things are going to happen to me. And more like, yeah, just like very fear based. And then reworking those belief systems through religion and spirituality, I mean, my mental health is a lot better. That's just my personal journey, right?
Yeah.
Someone else might have the opposite journey. So I'm not saying you have to have my experience. Um, yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I love that because I think there is I mean, if you were born into a religion and you find peace somehow, you find joy, you find community, you find love in that space. That's a like how to make it work for you, how to devote yourself and be part of that and yet also feel your personal connection, your personal expansion, your personal growth within those frameworks.
One thing I want to add, I was just inspired to add this on the topic of God. And by the way, if God is triggering for you, you can exchange this word. I'm not saying you, Christy, I'm saying listeners. If
Yeah.
it's triggering, I mean, love, the universe, your soul, expanded power, like it does not matter what relationship you're talking about. I'm just going to use God for myself.
Yeah.
I think part of my journey has also been like a re understanding of who God is to me, because we're often raised with a perspective that isn't our own. Like it's either coming from the family, it's coming from maybe a religious group, it's coming from community, friends, kids you go to school with, whatever. And so we're naturally absorbing these belief systems about God, about our own religious, mystical, spiritual experience. And then I find that in a lot of cases, we have to sort of tear down those belief systems and then create new belief systems around this topic that feel actually in alignment and authentic to us. Because we're often told, okay, this is who God is. But is that who God is to you? Right. And I think God is going to be different for everyone. Even if, like, I have this conversation with my mom sometimes we have completely different, but also similar experiences of God. And that doesn't mean that my God is different than her God or that mine is right and hers is wrong.
Right.
I think we're all individuals and part of a collective. So there is this collective experience, but there's also this individual experience. And so I believe mysticism is the seeking of that individual experience and understanding how that relates to the collective.
You know what I love that you just did is you just gave permission. Like you gave permission to yourself to have a unique experience with God and to invite other people to be in whatever religion you're in or not in, and allow yourself to have a really beautiful, unique relationship with what God, universe, love, whatever the word you want to use, means to you. And you can still be a part of any collective that you want to be a part of. And at the same time, because you're a unique individual, have a unique relationship that doesn't have to be what your neighbor has or your husband has or your mother has. Your relationship can be one that is, solely yours, that no one else has the same kind of experience. I love that's an aha thought for me. That's beautiful.
I love it. I would love to dive in because I feel like I'm putting myself in the listener's shoes and I'm feeling like, okay, Mysticism 101. I
Mm-hmm.
want to get involved. I want to develop this mystical sense. What do I do now? Like I've even found this with clients coming to me and they say, I want to have a relationship with spirit. And when I say spirit, I mean, that's just to me the beyond.
Yeah. Unseen world.
Yeah. How do I start? Like, what is step one? So I'd love for us to just talk about like
Yeah.
different things that we recommend for people. Do you want to start?
I would love that. Well, you know what? You brought up something I think that was a really easy way. Your first thing that I think this is a great place to start is dreams. Before we started, that you said that, we've all had kind of powerful dreams, that it's not just the rambling of our brain, and it can be your mind unwinding your day or whatever it is, but maybe you've had something that you've had a visitation, or you've had a some kind of extra sensory experience in another realm, that you wake up and you think, wow, that felt really unusual. So you had that idea. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. I think that we all can remember a dream that was particularly impactful for us. And it might be different. It might be, you had a departed loved one that came to visit you in a dream. It might be that you did have this aha moment, or you had this storyline in your dream that made you think about someone in a different context, or maybe an experience in a different context. The dream world, and I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on it by any means. I think there are so many different
Mhm.
perspectives of why we have dreams, what we're doing in our dreams, et cetera, et cetera. But just baseline, I believe that our dreams do access our expanded consciousness. So, again, that could be sometimes your fears, but it also could be sometimes there's energy there that has a thread of truth that is important for us to look at. And so, one great entrance point into kind of exploring the self, which is mysticism, is looking at your dreams. Have you ever had a dream that you could never forget? And then really like going back into that energy and understanding, is there something that you need to look at deeper within the self that the dream is informing you about? So dreams are I think a great
Mhm.
place to start. I also recommend writing. Like, I love to write. Write yourself a letter. Like, write in a journal, a notebook, whatever, type it, and just start that communication process. So, I also want to talk about feelings, emotions, and energy because the energy that lives in us is also related to something outside of us. So, a good example that I can give is when you feel an emotion like anger. Say, someone really pisses you off, cuts you off in line at Starbucks. You might feel anger in that moment. Usually, when you give yourself the credence to feel the anger, remember the emotion of anger is energy moving in your body. When you give yourself that ability to feel the anger, most of the time it moves through your body and you release it. So you're releasing it somewhere, you're releasing it back into basically this field of energy that we don't see. So going back to writing, even if you just write stream of consciousness, like I'm feeling tired today, you're starting to release energy and you're starting to create a relationship with that field around you. Does this make sense, Christine?
Well, yeah. So what I want to just to say about that is there's actually a really great book written about this, and it's called something like "You Can Heal Your Back Pain." And the Dr. Sarno, like Saurno, he was with Mayo Clinic, I think. And this is a guy, Western trained doctor, and he wrote this great book because what he found was he had this extraordinarily high number of patients who were able to avoid having back surgery through journaling. So this is a Western doctor, and I'd have to look it up. It's something like heal Dr. Sarno if you have back pain yourself. And the idea is that we have so many emotions that we've buried and stored in our bodies. And journaling, the process of writing out how you feel, begins this process of letting some of those emotions like flow out your fingertips, flow out your hands onto the paper, back out into the ether, out back into the universe. And so that we have these, we could do 5 episodes on trapped emotions in your body. So like this is a really, really, really big topic, but I 100% agree with you that, letting your emotions flow through writing them down is very freeing. Of just like weather, emotions can be like weather coming through you. It's stormy, it's joyful, it's whatever it is. But if the ones that are getting kind of stuck where you're not able to move through it gracefully, write them down. It's a wonderful tool.
Yeah. And that, from my understanding, is you're really solidifying this relationship, because to me, mysticism is also a relationship. It's your relationship with yourself, but it's your relationship with the expanded consciousness and the
Mhm.
field around you. So, one, you want to clear out your energy, like through releasing emotions, but it's also creating and solidifying this relationship. And then you can go deeper with it by expressing your wants and desires. So, I want to feel something more. I want to connect with blah, blah, blah. And the key here is really you need to remove judgment, because I think when you're really embarking on this journey, you might feel a little bit crazy. Like I have memories. Oh my God, I've never told you this story, Christine, but of me just before I really like knew much. I was young, and I remember trying to like channel different ghosts and ask them to show me things on my body if I could, like, and this would mean this and this would mean that. And I remember basically writhing around my apartment on 84th Street, um, with the radiator blaring, me trying to understand like the death process. Okay. I probably looked insane, and I think I felt insane. I was like, am I really doing anything? But removing that judgment and trusting the process. Also, things sometimes don't happen immediately. So sometimes I'll call out to the spirit realm and I'll be like, okay, I need support with blah, 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 blah. But then I need to release it. And you can speak too. You don't need to write. You can just have a conversation with,
Mhm.
trust me, people are listening. The spirits are always listening. And then you just need to create this non judgmental space for things to shift and change and flow. And going back to, my first teacher and my journey into really like having a mentor, I was asking for a mentor for years. I was so interested in spirituality, like I said, from the time I was like an adolescent. I mean, really, even younger. I didn't really get my first like physical teacher who was a mentor to me until I was like almost graduated from college. And, and she came into my life under different pretenses. And then only later did I find out, oh, she's actually going to be a spiritual mentor to me. So, I assure you, I was frustrated through that journey, but it was really the perfect timing. And that's been my experience with all of my teachers. They have come in at the exact perfect timing for them to be the most effective. Sometimes it's quick. I will say sometimes spirit, answers my call in like an hour, but I think really not having an expectation or a judgment on how it's going to be fulfilled or answered and what that timeline looks like is really going to save people a lot of frustration and fear and worry and all that good stuff.
So I would say with that, getting to be really precise with what your intentions are. So, like, for example, when I was 26, I was living in Salt Lake City. We were getting ready to move back to Los Angeles, and my husband was going before me. And so he was going to go find a place for us to rent. And so I had to trust him to find a place. He was staying with some friends while I was wrapping up things I was doing here in Salt Lake City. So I went and I lit a candle and I wrote down exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be in the mountains. The rent needed to be this price. Like I had a laundry list of things that needed to be on this list of this house I wanted to rent. And so, I was very intentional, very, very clear with the universe about what it is that I wanted. And so I handed him my order, like, this is what you need to go find. He's like, great, thanks. And so he gets to LA and, like, being the good sport that he is, he puts it on the dashboard. And the first house that he went to was that house. And he found this house in a canyon right next to Topanga Canyon. We were right below Dirt Road, Mulholland, surrounded by trees and nature, and it was the right price. And, I think I even put like wood floors. I put like a lot of windows. I put all of the things that I really wanted, but I was really intentional. So I would recommend, when you start working with the universe, is being clear about what it is you actually are trying to like manifest, bring into your world.
Totally. And I just went through this with my flat in London, and you've been there on this journey, but
Mm-hmm.
this is also a good example of sometimes you have to be patient, because I have been setting the intention for a very specific space in London for probably 2 years now. And I've been so clear on, okay, this is what I want. This is the price that I want. This is the area I want to be in, blah, 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 blah. And I'm used to, Christine knows by now, I'm used to like spirit pretty much delivering. I mean, not in every aspect of my life, but particularly when it comes to apartments, I've always really like nailed it. And I was so frustrated because I was like, why am I not finding anything that is even remotely like what I'm asking for? And I had the most incredible talk about spiritual experience with
Yeah.
finding this flat. But by the way, it took me almost 2 years. And I'd love to just share the story quickly
Yeah.
because I think it's inspiring. I was just randomly, just again, randomly in quotation marks, searching the online listings for an apartment. And and Spirit told me, they were like, yeah, you should think about going back in February. So I kind of had this like February date back in the back of my mind. I see a listing for a flat that is literally like, I could not picture a more me, a more perfect, and like it was like I personally designed it on The Sims. It was so just ideal and perfect. I mean, the price is a little bit higher than I want, but I digress. And the girl was looking for a sublet for December, January. But I just had it in me. I was like, you know what? Her lease is ending. Like, let me reach out to her and see if she's able to put me in contact with her landlord. So she does. I call the landlord, who's, by the way, all the way in London, far away from Los Angeles, where I'm at now. And we start talking, and the landlord tells me that her daughter has a very similar name to me, like a letter off. And she's like, wow, this is so strange. Like, would you believe this? And then she tells me that, she is a family member that lives like down the street from me in California. So we're just going, wow, this is so like aligned. This is so funny. And she's blown away. And I'm just kind of like, this is exactly how my life
Mm-hmm.
happens. So like, I'm not shocked at all. And she was so amazing to let me rent the flat, which it's really hard to get a flat in London. They're going through a major housing crisis, but it was just totally meant to be. But I had to wait 2 years, and I just have to trust that this is like the divine timing for me to go and have this amazing experience.
I know. I can't wait to come visit you there. And you're
Yay.
beautiful. I've seen pictures. It's lovely. So, what I would love to talk to you a little bit now is breaking down some of these other concepts, therapies, just to give an overview, not a deep dive. I think we should start with energy medicine. because people hear a lot about what is energy work, what it like, I don't understand it. This is a really broad topic, and it is really broad topic. And so I want to try to explain it as best as I can to have an understanding of what it means when someone says, oh, I'm going to have energy work done. So I think one of the easiest ways to understand it is think about Chinese medicine. So Chinese medicine has been around for thousands of years. Chinese medicine is based on the energetic systems in your body. So what that means is they have mapped out the human body, where there are these lines that run through your body called meridians. And you can almost think of meridians, or from the Hindus, they would be called the nadis. The Hinduism has their own, like Ayurveda, they have their own system that's kind of similar. So the meridians have these lines that flow through your body, like blood vessels or nerves, these systems, but they're etheric, and they have points on them. In Chinese medicine, they're called subos. And so all of these points and these meridians are correlated to an organ, and organs are correlated to emotions. So, for example, liver issues, that would be anger, kidney issues, that would be fear. And so when you go see an acupuncturist, they're treating what's happening emotionally, they're treating your physical symptoms through the organs, through these lines, putting needles in the subos, these points along your meridians, to balance the energy, because some areas will have too much, some areas will have not enough. So it's to draw energy to or disperse energy from. It's about balance, bringing those energetic flows back into balance based on these maps that have been developed thousands of years ago, that have been working all of this time. If you've ever had acupuncture, it's lovely. Um, so that's energy medicine. The same thing working with, when you look at Ayurveda and the nadis, and then they bring in the chakras. So these energy centers in our bodies, there's 7 primary, there's more, but working with your chakras, working with the nadis, working with those energy systems. So go ahead, do you want to add in?
Yeah, I just have to say, I mean, acupuncture has been a lifesaver for me. Every time that I've had a serious issue, and not to knock Western medicine, we absolutely
Sure.
need Western medicine. And I believe for me, it's like a partnership, like the
Mm-hmm.
Western perspective and the Eastern perspective together, I think can literally save and cure the world.
Yeah.
But the 2 times that I've really gone to acupuncture for a specific issue, it's because I went through the Western route and did not have any results. And one time specifically, I mean, I just will be forever grateful for the rest of my life. A couple years ago, I saw this acupuncturist in New York City, and I could feel it too because I remember she put these, and they were like thick needles. Like I don't know what kind, because I've done a lot of acupuncture over the years. These are like thick needles, and I could literally feel energy moving in my body. And not a week later did what I was looking for medically change. So
Yeah. So
that's
I
why.
mean, it's been around for thousands of years for a reason, because it often works. So So in acupuncture, they're working with, they call it chi, vital life force energy. Prana would be more in Ayurveda. Same thing, life force energy that they're working with. So you can also, like chi, the practice of qigong in tai chi, is working with energy in a physical way, more somatic, more moving of energy. So then you can take it out to, there's like layers of it. So then you could maybe see someone who does Reiki. Reiki energy would be, you would go to somebody who has had an attunement to where they are able to access this certain frequency bandwidth of energy. And if you've been attuned to Reiki, you know, there's symbols or sort of a word you hold, and they'll let this life force energy flow through you. And you mostly, I think, trust that the energy is going to the place of highest priority, what you most need when you're sort of channeling this Reiki energy. So we've talked in other podcasts about channeling. You could be channeling, you know, you bringing information from the unseen world. You can also channel energy. So Reiki energy is essentially channeling the frequency of Reiki energy. I do something, my first teacher, Jo Denning, her quantum energetic disciplines, and I studied for many, many, many years with her. And her technique called quantum energetic disciplines. Again, it's this energy that comes through you, you're initiated into it, and you work with someone's energetic field. It's the idea that you are not just this physical body, but you are also an emotional body, you are also an energetic body. And so, as a physical body, you can hold, emotions in there. The emotional body can also hold the residue, the good, the bad, all of that, energetic as well. So it's working with these systems to clear out or bring in also energy. So it's that balance of bringing you into harmony, coming into um, a sense within your, when I say energy bodies, I also think physically and emotionally, bringing all of those bodies into harmony. And so you feel a greater sense of sort of inner stability and ease with being within your body. So I'm hoping that breaks down a little bit of the concept of energetic medicine, a really, really, really broad topic, just distilled down.
Yeah. A lot of it's so interesting. When I tell people I do energy work, most people ask me, "Oh, do you do Reiki?" And I say, "No, I don't do Reiki." But that is a form of, obviously, we've talked about
Yeah.
energy work.
Mm-hmm.
But like the energy work that I do is a lot about patterns, belief systems, and emotional energy. So when I work with someone, I go into their emotional, spiritual, mental energy field,
Mm-hmm.
and usually they're coming to me because there's something that they want to shift in their life. And so we want to understand what the root of that pattern is and why it hasn't been able to shift. And I have found that there's so many like belief systems in our closet, ancestral energy, so on and so forth. Just a lot of things that we're holding in our field emotionally and energetically that we don't really want to be there, or that we've grown out of, but we haven't integrated that information into our being. And I've just seen amazing results in my personal life. And
Yeah.
I've been so lucky to follow some clients on this journey now too. But it's really just, it's what I'm so passionate about right now, and what's really interesting to me right now in my work, because like it's freedom, like understanding the emotional and spiritual energy and how to release it and how to move forward and how to move through it. You can have true freedom in life, and you can then really be free to create the life that is most alignment with you, in alignment with you. And most people feel more fulfilled that way. And I think when we're all individually fulfilled, we can be part of a better collective, because we're not holding on to these personal bitterness or anger or resentment or fear and yada, 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 that is then
Yeah.
kind of polluting the collective.
Well, and I think I'm sure you find this in your work too, that sometimes when you get into it, when you start doing this energetic work, you start to kind of dive deeper and deeper. And so you do start accessing the subconscious or memories that come up where you didn't realize that there is some memory that's still stored in there that is influencing your current life and how you're living. And so these sort of what's hidden within you that you don't know is causing you to operate a certain way, is you're able to sort of tap into to free that part of yourself.
Totally.
Um, okay, so that's an overview. A very, very, very. We could talk obviously lots of podcasts on energy medicine. Um, I want to talk about. I mentioned at the beginning the topic of Derek Pugh and having this experience doing this astral projection work. So there's something called, it's through the Monroe Institute, and I can't think of the name, but you can look up Monroe Institute, and it really gives these, you listen to these meditations, and they're guided, and it's about these guided meditations. I haven't done them myself, but I think it's fascinating. So that's something you, if like, oh, I'm kind of interested in that. Monroe Institute, kind of this astral travel. I have read one of Robert Monroe's books, and he had incredible experiences where they would test him about about getting in and out of his body and seeing other places. So that is documented. Now the CIA released information, I think, based on his work.
So
And
cool.
and remote viewing. You can look this up. So on they released information on astral travel and remote viewing. So there was like a 20-year experiment that I don't know, maybe it was released in the 90s, I'm not sure, but that's a documented thing where they spent 20 years remote viewing, secret bases and locations. And there's actually, I'm going to have a guy come on who has a school. He, I think, was ex-CIA, and he lives in St. George, Utah, and he has this really incredible school where he teaches people how to remote view. And so he's going to come on, hopefully pretty soon,
So cool.
talk about remote viewing. I've only had one experience remote viewing where it worked. It was just, I was at the Arthur Finley College, which we've talked about a lot, and we had, which is a psychic college in England. And just for a fun exercise, they threw out three coordinates for the group of like latitude or longitude, whatever those were. And they said, look, this isn't going to be that hard. These are three kind of, you know, known places. It wasn't like, an apartment building in Paris. So these are three known places with these coordinates. And I looked at all three of them. I know nothing about coordinates and longitude and latitude at all. But one of them I looked at and I was like, oh, that's the Giza Plateau. I just knew it. And I guess I had such a connection to Egypt. So that was the other two. I had no clue what they were, where they were, but I did have the experience of looking at this one set of numbers and being I know where that is. I could feel it. And I don't know why I could feel it, in Egypt. But so I think remote viewing is fascinating. And I have talked to people who that's what they do. There's an interesting story about a remote viewer. How there was a family, and I heard this at the college. There was a very wealthy family who lost a child, and they like disappeared, and they were so upset, and they like so much time had gone by. This person was never found. They just wanted closure, and so they hired a remote viewer, and the remote viewer told them that they would find her at this very remote place on like had fallen on a tree. And so they hired a helicopter to go and at the area, and she had fallen off a cliff or something. I think it was in Australia. Had fallen off a cliff and had landed in a tree, and that's where they found her from the helicopter.
Wow.
Only because of this remote viewer. So it's really, really, this is, that's an incredible information. I mean, there's just a lot with remote viewing. It's a fascinating topic. That's just another little teaser, something mystical, something different. We could talk, I mean, psychedelics are a way that people access these realms and have lots of mystical experiences.
We should do a podcast on psychedelics.
Yes, this is a touch. And by the way, I'm not saying I think yes or no. There's no judgment about it. That maybe were great for some people and really not great for some people also. So, but I mean, people often use them because clearly it's going to throw you into another realm when you have these substances. But you also, what I would say, it's a fascinating conversation. For sure, we should talk about it. But you can access these realms even without that. That there are ways to move into other realms, have these connections where you don't need an intermediary, which is what the psychedelic is. So I would also say that.
Totally, I agree with that. Although I will say sometimes psychedelics can remove the experience of doubt and or fear, because those two very human emotions can act pretty as strong barriers to, because the thing is you're always going to receive information from spirit. Everyone, we've talked about this,
Mhm.
like, everyone has access to spirit. Like Christine said, some people just
Yeah.
maybe have a little bit more of a propensity to for it. But I have people all the time say to me, well, I don't hear spirit, or spirit doesn't talk to me. And I'm like, wrong, they do.
Yep.
But if you don't think that they talk to you, or you have fear of hearing, or you doubt it, then you're probably not going to hear as strongly or be as confident about the information that you're hearing as if you didn't have those energies that were kind of acting as that barrier. So I agree with you. I think psychedelics are such an interesting conversation.
Mhm.
And I think that it is so person specific. Like, even the case, I can talk about marijuana, which is legal here in California. So I'm happy to
Yeah.
discuss it. I have tried it in the past, it is not with my frequency. Like, I have friends that love it. It's great for them. They have a good time. Every single time, which hasn't been too many times that I've tried marijuana, but I've tried it in different forms, tried it in different years. It just doesn't act well with me. And
Yeah.
that's because our frequencies don't match.
Hmm.
But someone else may match with it, and I may match with a different substance. And
Right.
so I really think that it's an individual, we talk about the individual journey. It really is. It's an individual frequency as well.
Yeah, we're all so unique. So when you talk about, well, maybe you can have more experiences if like it's the potential trying a psychedelic that maybe there's a potential to remove some of the barriers that are held within your mind if you have this belief system that you can't see or can't hear. So what does that mean? Those are the clairs. So we talk about being clairvoyant and clairsentient. So clairvoyant is I see, you have images in your mind that come in. You may sometimes get like some in your mind, you have an image of something and you dismiss it, but you're getting a picture, you're getting some information always. And you may think, oh, that's just the nonsense and the ramblings of my mind that mean nothing. But maybe the unseen world is communicating with you and giving you a packet of information or a symbol or a picture of something, and you just don't know how to interpret it and decipher it yet. So be open to the possibility that you're seeing a lot more than you're even aware of because you're dismissing it. So clairaudience, I hear. Maybe you've heard some, actually heard like a voice, or you've heard a voice in your head, or you've heard music playing, or like that. All of that's clairaudience. Clairgustance, you get a taste of something. That's ever happened.
Mhm.
Clair olfactory, you get a smell. I've had funny smells of like tobacco. Um, Not like cigarette smoke, but like tobacco. When I've had some Native American experiences, I've smelled flowers. I've smelled like perfumes. I've smelled things that were not in my awareness, or they weren't nothing coming from the world around me, but coming from accessing my scent in some way to bring me information. What other Claire am I forgetting? Claire,
Sentience.
I feel like you feel it. I have a lot of that. That gives me a lot of information. I'm not sure about you, Eliza, but if I have a client, I often will feel something in my body that gives me information about what's happening with them, or if it's mediumship with their loved one. So I feel a lot of things in my body referring to like my clients and patients.
I also have a note about the clairs because a lot of times your clairs can change. So I've had
Mhm.
seasons. I mean, my initial like clair was my clairaudience. I would hear like very clearly. And
Mhm.
then spirit really wanted me to develop my clairvoyance. So everything was sight. And I was a little bit annoyed because I'm like, I used to hear names. I used to hear very like clear places. And I'm like, now I'm seeing really clearly, but like, why
Mhm.
am I not hearing names anymore? And the spirit world told me, they were like, well, you really relied on your clairaudience. And what's interesting is now I'm kind of through the clairvoyance and I'm really in my clairsentience. And you and I feel a little bit differently because you said, you've talked about you'll feel things in your physical body that
Mhm.
will give you that sentient
Yeah.
feeling. For me, it's more like an emotional energy. And I think that because I work so much, like my own emotions talk about like a training ground for me. So I have such an extreme spectrum that I've gotten really attuned at understanding emotions really quickly. So when I'm feeling into a client, I'm like, oh, I know this. And now we got to go here, because
Mhm.
I'm working off their emotional energy. And yeah, so that's how I'm currently really, really into the sentience. And some of my teachers at AFC, which is really cool, talking about the clair smelling and the clair tasting. By the way, clair means clear. So it's clear tasting, clear smelling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
They will say you want to set the intention to taste. So most of us, just from the mediums and the intuitives and the people that I've worked with and I've known, they don't really rely on those clairs, the tasting and the smelling, as much as they would maybe their audience or their voyance or their sentience. So we want to basically set the intention to develop those lesser clairs. And it's so cool. It works every time. Once you say, okay, I'm just going to focus on the taste, then the way I would experience information I might see a piece of pizza, right? But I'm also tasting the piece of pizza. And I'm really like, oh, wow, I really am aware of this taste. Whereas if I didn't set the intention, maybe I saw a piece of pizza in my mind and it was meant to, refer back to a memory of, the client and their grandmother and how she always took them to pizza. So it's really cool. It shows how much our intention works with our whole awareness system.
Absolutely. And so we should also just describe the difference. So when you're studying, what we're talking about often with these clairs is doing mediumship, psychic work. So what's the difference there? What is the difference between doing a mediumship reading versus a psychic reading? A mediumship, and not that both can't blend together, but they're kind of different frequencies, quite honestly, when you're doing the work. So when you're working and doing a mediumship reading, you spend time to really kind of grow your energy a little bit. They'll at ASC they'll call it kind of stepping into the power, and you set an intention again, a blending with the spirit world. So you're inviting them. It's not just this thing that, oh, I hope someone comes in. It's intentional. Your intention is so key here. So I'm inviting you to blend with them, inviting you into my field. And when they blend their energy, they're an energy field. When their energy field kind of comes in and blends with your energy field, and you're holding a similar frequency, they kind of have to lower themselves a little bit. We have to raise a little bit to find this space, the sweet spot where we can communicate. Then they can bring forward the information. So that's doing a mediumship, bringing through information from a loved one. Psychic work is different. Psychic work is someone who is blending with your energy field. So my energy field is blending with your energy field. So that information that is stored within there, some of the hidden information can come to light based on that blending between your field and whoever the psychic person is reading your field. Just quick and easy breakdown of the difference between mediumship and psychic work.
I know it's inspiring me. I'm like, ugh, I've been,
Mm.
um, I told Christine, I've been so into my psychic work that I've been kind of taking a backseat on mediumship. I'm like, oh, I miss the spirit world.
I know. And so even if this is the work that you do, like Eliza and I, you may have a focal point for a while, like, oh, I'm really going to be spending, and some people are just like, hey, I'm a psychic. This is what I do. It's what I love. And then there's people like Eliza and myself who we're always got a lot of different tendrils
Yes.
that we love. And so we can't just pick one because there are so many things that are so wonderful in this work. So there are so many things that we could talk about. There's no way to get into all of it. We could talk about sacred geometry. We could talk about water. We could talk about more about the tarot cards, but we did a whole podcast on the tarot. So if you're interested in tarot, go back. We did tarot. Oh, did we do tarot, or we did more animal communication actually?
Well, we did the tower. We talked about the tower, which is a tarot card. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, we touched on tarot. I'm sure that, I
Okay.
mean, tarot is such a broad topic as
Mhm.
well, and we could totally do another podcast on
We could do another one just on divination cards and tarot.
it. And
Again, this
cards
talk.
and cards in general. I think so many
Yeah.
people ask me too, okay, I went to a card reader. Is that legit? And I'm like, let me explain to you guys how card reading works.
Yeah. So anyhow, there's a lot. So sorry, we didn't do one just on tarot, but we've touched on it several times. We could talk about reflexology. We could talk about like how there's so many points about energy and how it affects your body, and there's so many techniques, tools, like so many possibilities and potentials out there. This is touching on a little bit of it. I hope that this has broken it down a little bit, that the word mysticism feels a little bit more like current, that it's not some entirely out there. Like our mysticism is really our own journey, our own experience with understanding ourself, the inner realm of who we are, and how this inner realm of who we are connects to both this world and the unseen world.
I love it. We went on a journey. It was amazing. I look forward to coming on soon and diving into all these amazing topics.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for being with us today. We'll see you the next time.
Bye.